Okay, my name's Rod Mitchell. I came across Doughnut economics only 8 months ago and found it very interesting and useful. But there's a bit more of my history first that I'd like to mention. I'm part of Sustaining All Life, which is a part of a peer counselling movement that's been exploring how we can come to understand what it is that happens in our minds and our hearts that makes it so hard for us to think about the environment and to care for the environment. So Sustaining All Life is a deliberate process of figuring out how can we do that, and what are the things that we need to heal in ourselves so that we can reconnect to each other and reconnect to the planet. So that's been an important part of my life, and this T-shirt is kind of a variation on that one with lots and lots of hands instead of these patterns here. So Sustaining All Life has been really important for me, and a key part of it was understanding some of the social, economic, and cultural structures that are so destructive of our environment. And one of the things that I also learned through the peer counselling process that Sustaining All Life uses is that our economic system is really destructive, and it fits in with a lot of the dysfunctional social and cultural structures of our society, and that essentially we have to replace it. Capitalism is essentially a product of the class system and all the many other ways in which society is divided, and then it further divides us and keeps us separate from each other, but most importantly separate from the environment and separate from the planet that we live on. So that led to the whole thing about replacing capitalism. That was a key part of what I was learning in my counselling work. But I thought, how the hell do I just didn't have any ideas, no sense of how can I replace capitalism, because I've been, like most of us, bamboozled by economics and how apparently complex it is, and how how am I ever going to be able to get on top of that? But then more recently I got involved in Citizens Climate Lobby, which is an international organisation working to get a price on carbon internationally so that we can bring down emissions quickly. And we lobby members of Parliament directly to encourage them to take on positive policies. But so in terms of the reform and revolution stuff we were looking at earlier, Citizens Climate Lobby is very much working within the reform process of trying to find a way to get a carbon price that can work in the existing system. But a big part of me recognises that we actually have to work to replace capitalism. As I say, I didn't know how to do that, and then just 8 months ago I stumbled on Doughnut economics and started to read that, which gave me a huge boost, because it was at last here was someone who was speaking a language that I could understand and was explaining how current economics works and how we could actually replace the current economic system with something that works. So I'd like to introduce you to Kate Raworth, because she is the woman who wrote the book Doughnut Economics, and she's put out there's a lot of videos online that you can watch. I've picked out the shortest one so that you get just a quick sense of who she is and what she's like and how she communicates. And what I'd really like to know, what I'd like to come out of this session would be that some or most of you actually get inspired to go and read it, or to see more of her videos, because they are very, very useful. So without more ado, here's Kate Raworth.
In the 20th century, economics lost its purpose and started chasing the false goal of GDP growth. In recent decades, that has pushed many societies into deepening inequality, and it's pushing us all towards ecological collapse. This century calls for a new goal, meeting the needs of all within the means of the planet. In other words, it's time to get into the doughnut, the sweet spot for humanity. But that's no easy task. Today, billions of people still fall short of their daily needs, from food, housing and energy to healthcare and education. And yet, collectively, we've already overshot our pressure on some of Earth's most critical life support systems, driving climate change and the breakdown of biodiversity. What we do to this Earth in the next 50 years will shape the next 10,000. So let's replace that last century goal of endless growth with the goal of thriving in balance. And if we're to have half a chance of getting there, what economic mindset would be fit for the task?
So that's the doughnut theory that she's developed in her teaching and work as an economist. She did a lot of that work. She developed the doughnut apparently in working with a lot of non-government organisations and helping them to think about economics and how they can participate actively in it. So just to summarise, so it's useful to have a picture of the doughnut as well and to revisit some of the things. What she's done here is she's incorporated the nine different ways in which we are overshooting the planet's capacity to exist. She borrowed that from, what's the name of the Swedish man who developed that theory? I can't remember now. But and so what's clear now is that we've already overshot in terms of climate change, biodiversity loss, land conservation, and nitrogen and phosphorus loading. Those are places where we've seriously damaged the environment already. What's coming is chemical pollution, ocean acidification, ozone layer depletion, which we've pulled back from a little bit. Air pollution is, as you can see, it's grey there, it's getting worse. And freshwater withdrawals. So land conversion is the other one that's a serious problem. So she's combined that model with her own thinking about for us to exist on this planet, we need to be all in the sweet spot here, where we are living. We're all living where our basic needs are fulfilled and our human rights are fulfilled, and we're not overshooting the planet's capacity. It's a pretty simple picture, pretty simple model, but it's a wonderful way of just encapsulating how we can possibly pull back from where we are right now. So some of the key points that she makes. Martin's talk this morning was a really good critique of the deficits of current economic theory and practice, and Kate makes that point very well as well, that essentially all we've got is GDP growth. That is what nearly all of our economists and nearly all of our governments and nearly all our politicians are focused on. Is that all? So Kate makes the really good point that, well, if that's all we're doing, that's a very, very, very small goal. It's a pathetic goal, and as we know, it's a very destructive goal because it's actually taking us into very dangerous places. And yet, it looks like economists and politicians are addicted to the idea of GDP growth as the be-all and end-all, the holy grail that we all need to be working towards. And of course, that's what we as citizens are hearing all the time. That's what that's our government. That's what our governments tell us we want, and we go along with it. So she's saying economics actually needs to have a goal. It needs to have decent goals. It needs to have goals that work for humans and works for the planet. So she goes on to say, well, what growth of what? What are we growing, and why are we growing it, and who are we growing it for, and what are the consequences? Who pays the costs of those? And I heard another talk by another economist yesterday saying that essentially capitalism is based on the idea of how can we dodge paying the costs of what we're producing, and every form of capitalist activity is essentially dodging the cost of what we're doing. And she makes it very clear that today's economy is divisive, that it divides us into different groups, competing groups of people, competing for resource and competing for competing for resources essentially, and that And also that because of the way that the GDP growth is working, it's about ultimately it degenerates the environment and degenerates our society. So it's completely destructive and degenerative by default. That's the way it's working. So, but the great thing is that she offers some positive goals, and she's a large part of the book is about saying, well, what can we do? How can we turn it around? How can we make an economics that works for us humans, that works for the planet, and gives us a really good chance of staying on this planet for more than a few more centuries. So she said it there herself when she showed the donut, that we want to be thriving in balance. So there is a way in which we can all thrive and stay in balance with the way our planet works. That's number one. Meeting the human rights of every person within the means of our life-giving planet. So again, that's about staying in the donut means that we are respecting every human right to have their needs met and to have our ability to have food, shelter, creativity, healthcare, clean water, clean air, those sorts of things. Those are our rights as human beings. But it's really important, it's essential that we only have those rights within the means of our life-giving planet. In other words, we don't overshoot its limits. And she said it on the video there, and I love how she says it. Get us all into the donut, the sweet spot for humanity. And what she's holding out is a very positive message that we can actually live, we can actually reach that sort of that sweet spot. Obviously, it's going to be it's going to take a lot of work to get there, but it's useful to be focused that's positively. Okay. And she's saying that tomorrow's economy must be distributive. In other words, we're distributing resources, and regenerative by design. That we design everything that we do is designed to regenerate our planet, our climate, our resources. So, looking forward to 2035, what's it going to be like? Well, Doughnut economics was adopted by the WA government in 2025 and nationally by 2027, so WA led the way. Regeneration is now mainstream. Everybody thinks about regeneration. It's no longer are we focused about extracting and grabbing and not minding the cost of that. Regenerative agriculture is creating megatons of soil carbon. So Western Australia's wheat belt is now carbon positive, very carbon positive. It's drawing down lots of carbon and putting it into the soil. And it's producing much better crops because the soil is now much healthier. And 95% of West Australians are living in the donut. So in other words, we've pulled a lot of people out of the centre of the donut where they were missing out on their rights. Now, I mentioned earlier that Citizens Climate Lobby is lobbying for a price on carbon, and our particular favourite form of carbon price is carbon fee and dividend, and I'm pleased to say that it was adopted nationally in 2021. And so carbon emissions started to fall quite quickly, and they are now, in 2035, they are now down to 2% of 1990 levels. Fantastic achievement. And those divisions in society that I talked about, those class and other social divisions that between groups of people have come down quickly. The WA Premier is an Aboriginal woman. 3 of her cabinet members are also Aboriginal people. Inequality in Western Australia is halved because we are no longer living under a divisive economic system, but also because of sustainable life, we've done a lot of healing work. We've done a lot of reflection, self-reflection on who we are, and we figured out lots of ways about how we can come together as one people and work together to ensure that we're all living. Happy days!